Welcome line along 11th Street will now head to the zoo twice an hour between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. The ride will cost 50 cents. And today, Zoo President Peter Hoskins and SEPTA General Manager Louis Gambaccini joined youngsters on the debut run to the zoo. The 30th Street train station in Philadelphia has been transformed into a bookstore tonight. 70 of the nation's leading book dealers have rolled into town for a rare book fair. Some of the items on display include a first edition of James Joyce's Ulysses and a Christmas card signed by Malcolm X when he was known as Malcolm Little. Experts say some of the rare finds are worth up to $50,000.
Derailed train cars that went terribly wrong. News Center 10 cameras on the scene tonight in northeast Philadelphia. Heavy cranes have been brought in to lift two cars that rolled down an embankment. Crews are expected to work through the night. And here's the scene of that wreck earlier today in the 2700 block of Grant Avenue. Along with the 7-car derailment, a small trestle collapsed. Incredibly, nobody was hurt. The investigation continues. No decision yet.
Its trains, the company is pledging to improve service on the Northeast Corridor by sprucing up its cars and adding amenities for business travelers. The trains are being equipped to accommodate laptop computers, and fax machines will also soon be available on some trains. Amtrak believes passengers won't mind paying for all those goodies. Amtrak recently raised fares on its Boston to Washington line by about 10%.
Fighting in tens of millions of dollars, northeastern Pennsylvania is preparing for what it hopes will be a tourism breakthrough. This weekend, in a place where coal was once king, a tribute to America's railroad history will be unveiled. The project has been mired in controversy. The question is, will it be worth the time, effort, and money? As Rich Maneri reports, not everyone thinks so.
All aboard! If you take this train, there is something you must know. It leads to either prosperity or disaster. You are arriving in Steamtown, USA, in the heart of old coal country in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
It's the only site in the National Park System that tells the entire story of American steam railroading.
The finishing touches are still being applied to Steamtown. It officially opens Saturday, though tourists are already getting a sneak peek.
It's great for the historical aspect for the steam and the way things used to be on the old anthracite lines, and you tie it in with the coal country trip and a Poconos trip, you can really make a nice outing. Steamtown was 9 years in the making and wound up costing a staggering $66 million in federal money. It's billed as a museum of our nation's railroad history, but critics call it a gross example of pork barrel politics that will never be worth the time or money. Not true, says Steamtown's Tim O'Malley.
Take a look around. Most people who have seen the place have realized the value that the money was actually spent on something worthwhile.
This economically depressed area certainly needs something. Scranton's Janine Senefante believes Steamtown is the answer.
I think it's worth every penny of it. You look around today and there's a lot of young children, and that's what the children need, is to have something to do and something that's educational.
Some of Steamtown's most vocal critics are here in Pennsylvania's Amish country, home of the Strasburg Railroad. Strasburg attracts about 400,000 people a year without using federal or state money.
We get all our money for the restoration and operation of the railroad essentially at the ticket window. But when you have an operation or a situation where Steamtown has been set up, it's strictly a political football.
Lynn Modinger is vice president of the Strasburg Railroad. He doesn't believe Steamtown will ever attract enough tourists to make it worth the price.
We don't need it. It's redundant.
The people of Steamtown and Scranton hope the critics are wrong, that someday, through the steam, this piece of old coal country will be reborn. But if the critics are right, then millions of taxpayer dollars will have gone to waste, and the train to prosperity might be leaving town. Rich Maneri, the 10 o'clock news.
Alright, no D's permission out on time and close Thursday.
Far enough. Not here. This is Jimmy Kaufman, over. Jimmy, take your shot on number 3 track. Right, now pull up here. Track race, YP3, over. P3 race. Oh, you get a chance, what's the yard channel, please? YP3 restricting. Ready, Roger. Hey, Doc, let me couple up and I'll get right back to you.
about car length for a couple. Car, 6.
Goodbye to another institution this weekend. The last Broadway Limited train rolled out of 30th Street Station this morning. What a legacy this train had. Since 1902, it's been carrying passengers from New York to Chicago and stopping in Philadelphia. Today was the last day for the westbound run, and its final passengers paid a fond farewell.
When I had my honeymoon back in 1966, I took this train to Chicago and then another one back to California. So this is sort of a last reunion of a train that has been a fond remembrance in my history here.
The Broadway was the only direct train route from Philadelphia to Chicago. Amtrak closed it for financial reasons, a savings of over $17 million. And in just a
heritage is gone tonight. Rail fans are mourning the passing of the famous Broadway Limited. The final northbound run of the train ran through Philadelphia this afternoon. It ran between New York and Chicago through Philadelphia for 93 years. Now, to save $17 million a year, Amtrak's cutting the train from its schedule. The Broadway Limited was named not for New York's Broadway, but for the Pennsylvania Railroad's wide 4-track main line west. It's Broadway of commerce. Tonight, it's part of history. Still to come on Action News tonight, Neon
line today. Amtrak's Broadway Limited pulled into 30th Street Station for the very last time. The once glamorous flagship of the Pennsylvania Railroad is the victim of budget cuts. Amtrak hopes to save $17 million by dropping the route. The Limited has been stopping here for the last 93 years on its way from New York to Chicago. Passengers can still reach Chicago by rail, but now it means a change in Pittsburgh.
If you live or work near the East End,
that belonged for decades.
Bound for Los Angeles roared off the rails in the middle of night in the middle of nowhere. As 2 sleeper cars and a diner plunged into a 30-foot ravine, the 248 passengers on board were jolted awake.
There was a lady trapped in the bathroom, and they got her out. And just everybody helping everybody.
When they first told us, he said, we've had a minor derailment, please stay seated. So we didn't get up right away. And then they came in and said, does anybody have any medical experience? We need medics. And we're like, oh my God. So that's when I got off the train and I went over and I seen how bad it was, and it was bad.
The site of the derailment was so remote it took hours for some people to reach local hospitals. During that time, authorities say uninjured passengers discovered a typewritten note on the tracks. Law enforcement officials say the note attacked the federal government, the FBI, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Officials say it was signed Sons of Gestapo.
Whoever did this knew something about trains. And we believe it's a terrorist action, as evidenced by the evidence we found at the scene.
Federal authorities, who have now taken over the investigation, are much more circumspect. They will not discuss the note. They will not talk about the suspects. They will say only that this was no accident.
Right now, we're treating it as a crime scene. That's what we're investigating there.
Authorities say it could take several days just to comb the scene for all the bits of evidence, and much longer to clear all the wreckage away. Late this afternoon, the uninjured passengers were...
In addition to the tie spikes, bolts and brackets which hold lengths of railroad track together had been removed, the rails jimmied apart, and the electronic alarm system along the rails, designed to alert train crews to broken tracks ahead, was bypassed by a jumper wire which blocked any warning.
This was not vandalism, this was terrorism, because the difference is that when the signal wires are reconnected, the intention was to send the train into the ravine and kill a lot of people.
Amtrak officials said the terrorists clearly were going after people. The remote section of track targeted is used almost exclusively by passenger trains.
I find it despicable that anyone would jeopardize the lives of Amtrak passengers and crew for whatever purpose, and I don't care what the purpose was.
Sources tell CBS News
of problems up ahead.
This looks intentional, not an accident.
Or a ravine, so when the train came by in this direction, derailment was inevitable. Thomas Downs, Amtrak president.
I find it despicable that anyone would jeopardize.
Was removed, and indeed some of the spikes around there were removed. Then the two rails at the joint could move laterally and allow the wheels of the train to fall between the two rails.
Wires between the rails are severed. A signal up the track turns red to stop oncoming trains. But in this case, the saboteurs rewired the joint they had misaligned so the signal would not turn red. And alongside the track, just where it had been rigged, they left notes on each side, addressed to the FBI, to the ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, to Arizona State Police, and to the local sheriff as well. The notes were signed Sons of Gestapo, and in rambling text said the act was in retaliation for Waco, among other things.
But for someone to set out to do this deliberately is an act of cowardice. And I could only say that on behalf of all of us at Amtrak, we certainly hope that whoever did this, for whatever reasons, that they are quickly found.
So tonight, agents are scouring their records to find any reference to a group called Sons of Gestapo. But so far, none has been found. They do feel whoever did this had a good working knowledge of railroads. And tonight, the railroad industry has warned all American railroads to be on the alert for any further acts of sabotage. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
When NBC sabotage out here in the middle of nowhere. Hurtling through the dark of the desert night, the Sunset Limited met its end at 1:20 in the morning, and now America faces the chilling prospect of more death and damage that was intended. Domestic terrorists, apparently calling themselves Sons of the Gestapo, targeted the Miami to Los Angeles train, expertly sabotaging the track. 78 of 248 people were injured, 12 critically, and 41-year-old sleeping car porter Mitchell Bates was killed.
Almost everybody on the train was asleep. Don't remember a whole lot. I remember just slammed, just stopped, automatically just stopped. Threw me right out of my seat.
Cars plunged 30 feet off a wooden bridge and onto the dry riverbed of the barren and isolated desert landscape near Hyder, 60 miles southwest of Phoenix. Sheriff said notes found near the wreckage called the derailment payback to the ATF, referring to the sieges at Waco and Ruby Ridge, clarion calls of the violent anti-government extremists. And it seems it may have been an inside job. 29 spikes on a 19-foot-long section were removed, and the electrical warning wire rerouted in a sophisticated maneuver to prevent any detection.
I'm getting fed up with what's going on across our nation. You had the New York situation, you had the Oklahoma City bombing. It's, you know, when people can't cross the nation in a train without fear, being blown up or what have you. What's our country coming to? And
Amtrak's President Thomas Downs called the remote location ideal for such an attack.
Someone obviously intended to drop the train off the trestle into the ravine.
Well, investigators here in Arizona have never even heard of the Sons of the Gestapo, but apparently they had plenty of time to carry out this attack. The last freight train rumbled through here 18 hours earlier, and just to get where I'm standing, you have to drive on a 12-mile long dirt road and then walk into the crash site another 6 miles. Well, tonight, the FBI has launched a nationwide manhunt, and they are afraid that we have witnessed the latest deadly handiwork of the extremists. That's the latest from the derailment in the Arizona desert. I'm Eric Shawn, Fox News. Back to you.
All right, Eric, thanks. A very powerful earthquake rocked Mexico's Pacific coast this morning. At least 65.
Yeah, I'm scared to death.
For good reason, the nation's capital is one of the destinations on the Northeast Corridor, making it an obvious target for anti-government terrorists.
Yeah, I think they need to put more security on them, you know, to help us out and stuff.
Could she have paid cash? They have. Amtrak workers have been asked to be a little more observant than usual, keep a lookout for suspicious-looking passengers, and keep an eye out for any packages passengers leave behind.
Very scary, isn't it? Especially when my friend is thinking about taking the train next month to Tucson.
Her friend is concerned too, but not enough to cancel the trip.
There's a little question in your mind, but I'm not going to let it stop me. Because I really feel safer in the train than I do any other way.
It makes me apprehensive. I mean, I have to do this, so I have no choice. But, you know, it makes me wonder. I mean, you know, anybody can get on the train. This can happen anywhere.
And while passengers were boarding the trains, Amtrak workers were checking and rechecking the tracks. What? Making sure none here had been tampered with.
I'm not worried about taking the train, but I'm sorry that people feel that the way they have to fight big powers is to hurt little people.
Now, about half of the trains in and out of 30th Street Station each day are run by SEPTA, and they are taking precautions as well, increasing the number of track inspections they do each week. And their people, too, have been told to keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. In addition, SEPTA is running trains through the night without passengers just to make sure there are no obstacles on the tracks. Live at 30th Street Station, I'm Wendy Dalcombe. Steve and Victoria.
30th Street Station, I'm Doug Scheimel, News 10. Back to you, Ken.
Well, as you found out, I guess most passengers feel it's well worth it.
They don't really have any choice. They just have to get on the train. Most of them, the alternative might be a bus, and they prefer the train, so they have to go.
Very good, Doug. Thank you very much. Our other top story tonight, the first interview with former double murder defendant O.J. Simpson.
These seemed to be passengers' least concern. The Arizona derailment wasn't the most surprising news, but hearing that it may have been the work of saboteurs was quite a shock.
I think that's horrible. I think that's disgusting.
The first thing, all I heard was an Amtrak derailment, and, you know, my heart started beating.
It makes me feel a little leery about taking the train.
It's surprising. I mean, certainly today, lots of people like the Unabomber and stuff, there's lots of stuff like that going on. I don't know what that says about the state of America.
And we're back here live at 30th Street Station, where, as you can see by the schedule board, things seem to be rolling along pretty smoothly here, and that's surprising. Despite all that added holiday travel, things seem to be going pretty well. Now, there were some delays, but they were the typical trains, those that, for whatever reason, usually run behind. But other than that, not bad, Larry.
They have a lot of track to be inspected on a stepped-up basis, don't they, if they want to continue to do that for several weeks?
Yeah, they do, Larry, but Amtrak officials don't seem to think that that will be a problem because not all the tracks are inspected at the same time or at the same frequency. It all kind of depends on how often they are used. So you're right. There's a lot of nuts and bolts and screws and spikes that they're going to have to keep an eye on.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. An assault victim is speaking.
A sabotage attack on the Amtrak train in Arizona may be a copycat crime. As heavy equipment continued to hoist derailed cars out of the ravine in the desert, investigators were turning their attention to a magazine with a tiny circulation. The magazine published a story just a week and a half ago about a sabotage attack on a train in the Nevada desert in 1939. The way the tracks were disabled, remarkably similar to the Arizona event. There are 30 subscribers to the magazine in Arizona, and the FBI has begun to interview them. Most of
what city are you going to? Single passenger? Yeah. Number 57. To your right up the stairs.
days a week, Amtrak's Sunset Limited leaves New Orleans and rolls westbound through the desert Southwest and 2 days later into Los Angeles. On the Saturday afternoon of October 7th, 2 locomotives pulled 10 cars, 248 passengers, and 20 crew members. Among them, Darrell Taylor.
I've been cooking for about 10 years now, and I've been working with Amtrak for about a year and a half.
As an Amtrak chef, Darrell Taylor almost never meets the passengers who eat his cooking. But the Sunset Limited was about to force Darrell and his passengers to depend on each other for their very survival.
When we were pulled into the Phoenix station, I was feeding the baby and giving him his midnight feeding because he was hungry.
Brian and Cheryl Jepson were traveling with their 5 young children.
You pulled out of Phoenix.
Yeah.
And you went back to sleep.
Yeah, I just got back to sleep.
I was sound asleep, and I can remember hearing like the brakes.
I woke up, the train wheels felt like it was, the sound was like a flat tire.
And then all of a sudden it was like a big jump.
I could feel the track, the wheels of the train and the track disengage themselves.
The passengers had no way of knowing that the track had been terribly damaged. Miles away, trauma nurse Dale Gladden was still asleep, unaware he was about to face the biggest challenge of his career.
Then I remember just being thrown from each side of the room, back and forth.
I just knew it was a derailment.
My whole face slammed into the window when we finally stopped rolling.
Next thing I knew, I was on the floor.
I laid there.